Jesus, finally she concluded, "Sir, I see you are a prophet." And the love that is described in the prophetic books is precisely the love we have been talking about these days. And the same word agape, again, comes from a Hebrew word which was phonetically transliterated into Greek, into agape. God's passionate love for his people, for humanity, is at the same time, first and foremost, a creative love. As Pope Benedict said in Deus Caritas Est, all other gods are not God, and the universe in which we live has its source in God and was created by him. This is the perception of the people of Israel. Certainly, the notion of creation is found elsewhere, yet only here does it become absolutely clear that it is not one God among many, but the one true God himself who is the source of all that exists. The whole world comes into existence by the power of this creative word. Consequently, his creation is dear to him, for it was willed by him and made by him. So this God loves his own creation and loves men and women at the top of the creation. The one God in whom Israel believes loves with a personal love. His love is an elective love. Among all the nations, he chooses Israel and loves her, but he does so precisely with a view of healing the whole human race. So one first characteristic of the agape that we can track back in the prophetic literature of the Bible is a creative love. A second characteristic is that that love is a forgiving love. It is so great that it turns God against himself, his love against his justice. Here Christians can see a dim prefigurement of the mystery of the cross. So great is God's love for man that by becoming man he follows him even into death and so reconciles justice and love. And we can hear now from the prophet Hosea, "How can I give you up, O Ephraim? How can I hand you over, O Israel? My heart recoils within me. My compassion grows warm and tender. I will not execute my fierce anger. I will not again destroy Ephraim. For I am God and not man, the Holy One in your midst." On the other hand, the word that comes from above and is handed over through the prophets is a denouncing word that expresses God's judgment on the history of Israel, manifesting its sin and evil. It is a word of consolation and hope at the same time, because precisely in that twisted mix of evil and good, God decides to intervene for the salvation of all. We read in Isaiah, "Comfort, give comfort to my people, says the Lord. Speak to the heart of Jerusalem and proclaim to her that her service has ended, that her guilt is expiated, that she has received from the hand of the Lord double for all her sins." In the intimate relationship that all prophets attempt to restore between God and humanity, gradually appears that specific characteristic that attracts our attention in our colloquium, a love that heals, a healing love. This particular kind of love implies the acceptance of an original situation of illness. The human condition appears deeply marked by a state of non-health, of illness in fact, assuming that a condition of balance exists instead. And God, with his healing love, calls back humanity to himself. So humanity that has experienced God's healing love, described in the prophetic literature, feels impelled to transform this experience into commitment. Commitment in assisting, alleviating the suffering of the poor, in justice, advocacy, campaigning for human rights, in promoting integral human development, in reconciliation, both individual and collective, in caring for the common home, ecology, supporting sustainable lifestyles. So everything stands on this healing love. And if the Holy Father, Pope Francis, is a worthily acknowledged hero of this compassion, it is precisely because in the whole of the biblical tradition, this healing love plays a very important role, as specifically in the prophetic literature. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Eminence, Gio Marenko, for your wonderful presentation, precious knowledge shared with us. Next, may I invite Venerable Maharankama Anantathero from Sri Lanka present the topic to Compassion Karuna in Delavata Sutta. Venerables, you have 15 minutes. Thank you.
Namo Buddhaya. Ayubowan. A pleasant morning to everybody. Most Venerable Mahasangha, Reverend Fathers, brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen, dear devotees. Today I'm going to speak about compassion or Karuna in Theravada Suttas. First, let us look at compassion as a universal virtue. Karuna is a universal virtue of compassion which removes pain or suffering from living beings. Compassion is classified as one of the four infinite feelings, apramanas, as it gives happiness to infinite living beings. According to Theravada Buddhism, human beings as well as other sentient beings, wherever they are born among the 31 realms of existence, will invariably undergo immense suffering until one day they gain enlightenment by following the Buddhist path of liberation. In his first sermon called the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, meaning the turning of the wheel of truth, to the 5 ascetic companions, the Buddha described the universality of suffering existing in the world. He said, birth is suffering, aging is suffering, sickness is suffering, death is suffering, association with the unpleasant is suffering, dissociation from the pleasant is suffering, and not to receive what one desires is suffering. In short, the 5 aggregates of attachment, the Pancha Upadanakkhandha, is suffering. Now let us see how Theravada has defined Karuna or compassion. In Theravada canonical text, the Buddha is often referred with the phrase Maha Karuna, which stands for the one with great mercy. Elsewhere, the Buddha is honored as Maha Karunikanatha, denoting the savior of great mercy. The Theravada commentarial tradition extensively defines Karuna as Paradukke sati sadhunang hadayang kampanang karoti iti karuna, which means the Karuna is pity and sympathy that arise in good human beings, which they see others in adverse circumstances. Another exegetical text defines the compassion as Ahita Dukkha Apanayana Kamata, which stands for the desire of removing pain and sorrow from one's fellow men. The practice of Karuna is considered one of the 4 Brahma Viharas or divine abodes in Theravada, which also includes loving kindness or metta, sympathetic joy mudita, and equanimity upekha. The cultivation of these qualities is believed to lead to a deep sense of inner peace, happiness, and liberation from suffering. Further, they are referred to as abodes of Brahma, as the Brahmas or heavenly beings are supposed to possess limitless loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity towards other beings. Compassion is a quality of mind which can feel empathy and concern for suffering in others, as if it is one's own, and wants to act in a way which will reduce or bring an end to the suffering. A glossary of Pali and Buddhist terms has defined Karuna as the aspiration to find a way to be truly helpful to oneself and others. In simple terms, compassion is a genuine wish, which is not selfish or self-centered, to see happiness in others and to do whatever possible to relieve others from their suffering. Next, let us have an idea about the magnitude of the practice of compassion in brief. By practicing Karuna, one can develop a strong sense of empathy and compassion towards all beings and work towards alleviating the suffering of others. It is believed that the practice of Karuna not only benefits others but also leads to the practitioner's spiritual development and liberation from suffering. Compassion is an innate positive quality inherent in every human being mind, which exists at different levels in different individuals, depending on how far it has been cultivated and developed. Its manifestation will also depend on to what extent it is being inhibited and suppressed by other negative qualities, such as resentment, envy, and jealousy. For some people, it may be possible to show compassion to one's immediate family members, relatives, and friends when they are in distress, but not to others or strangers. Others may find it difficult to show compassion to those who have caused their own suffering through their behavior and to people who have been hostile to them or to their enemies. Personal qualities such as the ability to share and to show sympathy, empathy, care, and concern for others can be described as external manifestations of compassion in one's heart. It is easier to show compassion to others when oneself or members of one's immediate family have gone through similar distress and suffering and knew what it felt like and its consequences firsthand. Now let us survey compassion as a powerful motivational factor. There are certain wholesome and positive virtues inherent in the human mind which can give rise to positive emotional health, happiness, rewarding social relationships, and contribute to spiritual development when they are developed and maintained. Among the 4 Brahma Viharas, compassion follows loving kindness. When one develops loving kindness towards others, it will naturally lead to compassion when one encounters suffering in others, wishing for their suffering and the causes of suffering to stop. Abstaining from killing any living beings, as the Pali term goes, Panati Pata Veramani Sikha Padang Samadhyami. The first of the 5 precepts, Panchasila, that a lay Theravada Buddhist undertakes to observe on a regular basis to maintain one's moral behavior or sila is mainly based on the principle of compassion towards other living beings. One does not like to be harmed, punished, or killed, and similarly, other beings too fear experiencing harm, punishment, and death, and hence one would want to abstain from harming or killing other living beings. Through great compassion for the world beings, the Buddha used to survey the entire world with his divine eye, to which we call Maha Karuna Samapatti Jnana, early in the morning to see who could be helped with his spiritual guidance on that day. Having identified such a person, the Buddha would go to them, often by foot and uninvited, to provide spiritual guidance so that they would enter the spiritual path of liberation, dependent on their previous perfections, to which we call parami. Throughout the 45 years from enlightenment to passing away at the age of 80, the Buddha comforted the bereaved with the consoling words, ministered the sick with that were deserted, helped the poor that were neglected, ennobled the lives of the deluded, purified the corrupted lives of criminals, encouraged the feeble, united the divided, enlightened the ignorant, clarified the mystic, guided the benighted, elevated the base, and dignified the noble. Now we are to see compassion as a vital part of the Buddhist discipline and practice. Venerable Buddhaghosa, the great commentator, the Buddhist scholar in the 5th century AD, has defined the Brahma Viharas in his masterpiece, The Path of Purification, to which we call Visuddhimagga, as follows. Why are these called Brahma Viharas? It is because they are supreme and faultless. These states constitute the best mode of conduct toward others. Cultivation of the quality of compassion is based on one's belief that, similar to oneself, all other beings in the universe too like happiness and would wish to be free from their suffering, but continue to suffer from ill health, unhappiness, fear, grief, physical and mental pain, and other forms of suffering. True compassion is to be able to wish relief from suffering to others, irrespective of who they are. The fact is aptly described by the Buddha in the 129th verse of Dhammapada, which goes, Sabbe tasanti dandassa, sabbe bhayanti machuno, athanang upamang katva, nahaneya na ghataye, which gives the meaning, all fear punishment, all fear death. Comparing oneself with others, one should neither kill nor cause to kill. If one expects to gain some benefit for oneself, such as a better relationship, fame, or popularity through an action to help others, there is a selfish motive and is not genuine compassion. In the Maharahula Sutta of the Majjhima Nikaya, the Buddha has instructed Venerable Rahula, his son, to meditate on compassion in order to get rid of the negative quality of cruelty. The Buddha says, develop the meditation of compassion, for when you are developing the meditation of compassion, cruelty will be abandoned. Then let us take Karuna as a cornerstone of the meditative life.
Venerable, you have 2 minutes.
The practice of Karuna is often done through meditation, where one reflects on the suffering of others and generates a feeling of compassion and empathy for them. It is also practiced through acts of kindness, generosity, and service toward others. Having an understanding and compassion into one's own difficulties, weaknesses, distress, and suffering can enhance one's ability to cultivate compassion for others. When hatred develops in one's mind towards someone else, cultivating compassion towards that person will be an excellent way of subduing that anger. In the Agatha Vinaya Sutta of the Anguttara Nikaya, development of compassion has been described as one of the 5 techniques to subdue hatred towards a person. The Buddha says, when one gives birth to hatred for an individual, one should develop compassion for that individual. Thus, the hatred towards that person should be subdued. Now we are going to identify compassion as a crucial wing for awakening. When one starts meditating on compassion, it is possible that there is no obvious compassion present, but with practice, it will eventually develop and to be noticed. One needs to practice meditation on compassion with patience and perseverance, especially during the initial period, but with persistent practice, one would gradually master the technique and be able to feel compassion to even those who are experiencing extreme distress and suffering. Now let me enumerate some benefits of meditation on compassion. It will give you the ability to develop the deep concentration and attain meditative absorption states, jhana. Meditating on compassion will enhance spontaneous compassion for others. It will improve the ability to connect with oneself and others. It will help one to become more tolerant and forgiving. It will enhance one's motivation to work actively to help those who are suffering. It will improve inner strength and self-confidence. It is known to reduce stress, anxiety, and depression. It will enhance positive qualities such as empathy, sharing, care, and concern for others, which will lead to improved personal and social relationships. Sustained compassion of the mind will, after death, lead to rebirth in Brahma world. Deep concentration attained through compassion meditation can be used to proceed with insight meditation or vipassana. Now we are about to identify two enemies to compassion in disguise very briefly. It should be noted that compassion is not self-pity or pity for others who are experiencing misfortune. When one practices compassion, one needs to be mindful of its enemies. There are two types of enemies to compassion, a far enemy and a near enemy. The far enemy to compassion is cruelty, wanting to cause physical and or mental pain and unhappiness in others, which is easy enough to identify. Cruelty may also manifest as insensitivity and lack of concern for suffering in others, as a tendency to exploit more vulnerable people. It is much more difficult to identify the near enemy, the sentimental pity, which can be mistaken as true compassion. Pity may look very similar to the compassion at a superficial level, but it lacks any identification with the sufferer, placing oneself above the sufferer, and there is a strong sense of sadness and sympathy towards the sufferer who is considered unfortunate to be in a situation of suffering. I'm concluding this short speech with this. Now we are to realize that compassion is timeless. When compassion is absent, it can lead to personal, relationship, and social problems. Cultivation of compassion will act to counter the negative quality of the wish to harm others. In the Noble Eightfold Path, the Buddha has stated three types of right intentions, the need to be developed by the disciple, cultivating the path of liberation. The first is the right intention of renunciation, to which we call Nekkhamma Sankappa. The second is a right intention of goodwill, Avyapada Sankappa. The third is right intention of harmlessness, Avihinsa Sankalpa. Right intention of harmlessness is to counter the negative and harmful thoughts of aggression and violence towards others, and is achieved by developing compassion, karuna, towards all other beings, as they are also subject to various kinds of suffering. One should be able to express compassion to all beings in the universe in a boundless and limitless manner, with no limitations by barriers such as discrimination, prejudice, and personal preference. Compassion can also be extended to those who appear to be happy and not suffering currently, but are engaged in actions that will bring them harsh consequences and intense suffering later, either in this life itself or in future lives. The present war-stricken and wounded world should be humble enough to assimilate the Theravada concept of Karuna and reciprocate the compassion that had been shown to all sentient beings by the Buddha wholeheartedly for the welfare and benefit of the many. Sabbe sattha bhavantu sukhisatta. May all beings be free from sorrow and pain. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you very much, Venerable Maharankama Ananta Thero from Sri Lanka. Next, the topic about the agape hearing love in the Gospel Scriptural Foundation for Hearing of Within Humanity will be presented by Reverend Frater Gang In Gan. Brother Frater. Please, you have 15 minutes, please.
Yes, my name is In Gan of Love. My presentation is about agape, the healing love in the Gospels, scriptural foundation for healing or wounded humanity. Let me ask a question. What is the core of Christian faith? The core of the Bible. Many of you know yesterday and today heard of love, agape. Yes. Deep within the Bible, we discover a profound and transformative force, love. It is not any love, it's the agape love, the divine love of God. As Scripture said and internally reminded us, John chapter 3, verses 16, for God so loved the world that he gave his only Son. This is the core message of the whole Bible, especially in the Gospel. Our God is triune God. In the Trinity, the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit intrinsically connected each other through selfless love, agape. The cosmos, nature, and humanity are intricately connected through this agape divine love. This concept resonates with the Buddhist notion of paticca samuppada, signifying the interbeing of existence. This famous art by Michelangelo, The Creation of Adam, shows the Christianity, this interbeing, manifests the relationship between God and nature, God and humanity, and the relationship between humans. Human is so inherently one, interconnected in a web of love, as each person is created in an imago Dei, the image of God. However, this harmony of this divine relationship is jeopardized by human selfish desire, egoistic desires, which the Bible calls sin. So the path to healing our wounded humanity involves a return to the original love called agape. It's a transformation from self-desire to selfless love, from self-desire to selfless love. We believe Jesus Christ manifests this agape love. Indeed, the heart of Jesus reflects the heart of God. His mercy is the mercy of God. In the Hebrew, the word for mercy comes from the word for The is rakham, and the mercy is rakham or rakhamim. So this connection between mercy and the highlights the nurturing, compassionate, and deeply caring nature of God's mercy. God's mercy, rakham, is much like mother's care for her child in her womb, raham. This understanding underscores the profound and tender nature of God's mercy, which is also reflected in the compassion of Jesus during his earthly ministry. So in the Gospel, the Greek word for compassion is this, splachnizomai. Splachnizomai, a little bit difficult, right? Splachnizomai. It is not a simple empathy or a simple sympathy. It is a word derived from the deepest emotions within our body, the internal organs. When you have splachnizomai, your internal organs like heart, stomach, gut, liver are broken down, torn apart. You cannot bear it. So what does it mean to have splachnizomai? It means accepting others' suffering and pain with your very being shaken and aching all the way down to your core. Your core being is shaken. So when Jesus loves us, his heart is broken down. His heart is shaken. So our wounds are his own wounds. Our suffering, his own suffering. Our sorrow is his own sorrow. That's why Jesus took our illness and bore our disease. Matthew chapter 8. So splachinizomai shows his agape love for the wounded humanity. So there are many stories in Gospels, the healing story by agape compassion of Jesus. When he saw 5,000 people are hungry, he felt that compassion, great compassion, splachinizomai, to feed them. When he saw the person who was sick, ill, he felt that great compassion, he touched and healed. When he saw lepers, he felt the great compassion and healed the wound. And paralyzed for 30 years, he never skipped this kind of people. He felt splachinizomai of great compassion and bring them to the society. Not only physical, but emotionally isolated people, marginalized people, and also spiritually wandering woman. He healed and make her to be a proclamator of joy of gospel. So he never say no. He always say yes. He embrace anyone, any caste, any ethnics, any nations come to him, he embraced by love. So we can rise again in this world. One of the most resonant stories in the gospel is the prodigal son. This parable encapsulates the essence of returning to God's agape love. The prodigal son's journey back to Father mirrors our own, where we find our own wounds and healing and restoration in the embrace of God's loving care. Jesus himself showed this mercy. So on the cross, finally, he shows divine mercy through the unconditional forgiveness, not only for friends, but enemies. He said, Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing. For the people who are killing himself, for the people who are nailing now, even great suffering, Jesus said, Father, please forgive them. They don't know what they are doing. He further said, no one has greater love than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. He laid down his life not only for friends, for his enemies too. So in the Last Supper, he showed the example. On the cross, he showed the example. On the Eucharist this morning we celebrated, he showed the example. So John's letter recommended us, by example of Jesus Christ laying down his life for us, we have come to know what love is. Therefore, we should also be willing to lay down our lives for our brothers and sisters. The compassion is to express through actions. Jesus commanded us one commandment: love one another as I have loved you. If you want to know more concrete way of what that love means, you can read the first letter to Corinthians. The love is patient, love is kind. You can see the list of the love, and love never ends. So what we have to do is return, metanoia, return to God's agape love. is a call to care not only for ourselves, but for others and the environment, all of which are grievously wounded. We are not alone in this endeavor. In the quest for healing, human fraternity becomes essential, and you are the one of them. You are the common pilgrims to go walk together. And I believe the Christian Agape meets Buddhist Karuna here in this place and in your own places. We are working together for heal the wounded humanity. So in the end, the message is clear. The purest agape love and the deepest compassionate karuna is the key to healing our wounded humanity and mending our ailing world. It's a call to action, a journey of transformation, and a shared mission for all seeking a brighter, a more loving future. Thank you.
Farewell, thanks, Venerable Frater Kang In Gan, for your wonderful presentation. Share with us. Next, Venerable Sin Hin Hang, the Chairman's Committee of the Master of Buddhist Counseling Program Center of Buddhist Study, will share the precious knowledge with us. The topic on the compassion Karuna in Mahayana Sutta. Please, Venerable.
Good morning, friends and colleagues. Waiting for my PowerPoint to come up. I'm trying to use 15 minutes to tell you my life stories in promoting Buddhist counseling. I want to tell you how I go from a Buddhist religious person to becoming a Buddhist counselor. We have an opportunity to start at the Center of Buddhist Studies in the University of Hong Kong in 21 years now. And during that time, we were able to serve more than 10,000 students. And that's not what I want to talk to you about. In the Center of Buddhist Studies, we are now a platform for teachings, research, and publications. We have several different academic programs, master program, undergraduate programs, and Master of Buddhist Counseling program, and a postgraduate diploma in professional practice of Buddhist counseling. I want to explain to you how I came up with all these programs. Back in years 2000, I was inspired by the MBSR program. Of course, you know the MBSR program, the mindfulness-based stress reduction program. When I was still a young monk, I was approached by many of my followers and asked me to help them with their psychological problems. Of course, I introduced them at that time to meditations and Buddhist chanting, and it did not work quite well. So I had the opportunity to meet John Kabat-Zinn. He's the guy that developed the mindfulness-based stress reductions. And I was most inspired by how he was able to incorporate Buddhist teachings into these Western psychological-based interventions. And all that time, the research into mindfulness-based intervention has been going up from almost nothing to now more than around 2,000 academic journals every year. So I was thinking, if mindfulness alone was so effective in helping people to deal with stress and psychological issues, why don't we, as a Buddhist, incorporate all of it? Because even in the MBSR program, they noticed that MBSR is an intervention, need to be free from its cultural, religious, and ideological factors associated with Buddhist origins and Buddhist mindfulness. The program, however, John Kabat-Zinn pointed out, need to remain faithful in both spirit and substance to the universal Dharma dimension. So That's what John Kabat-Zinn said, and also in T-Styles and people, they said that mindfulness has always been only one of the number of components of a much wider interventions path. So we decided to incorporate the whole thing. Why not the whole Buddhist path of ending suffering? So in fact, there are two Buddhist paths. The early Buddhist teaching path, which we more or less label as the pathological model, and also which is associated with Theravada in Buddhism, and also the Mahayana path, which we associate with the wellness model, so which is Chinese Buddhism and Tibetan Buddhism. So we decided to develop two models: the early Buddhist path, pathological models, which we to end suffering as a particular the suffering of reincarnation, which would incorporate the Four Noble Path, and also the what we call the Dharma therapy. It's an intervention that employs this pathological model. In this model, we also the Mahayana model, instead of targeting suffering and elimination of suffering, a Bodhisattva would be driven by deep compassion to to save all sentient beings from suffering. And for Bodhisattva, suffering is not something to be eliminated, but a means to develop compassion. So with wisdom and compassion, a Bodhisattva would have the skillful means to deal with all the challenges he or she would face while remaining in Samsara to save all sentient beings. So with this in mind, we developed the awareness training program that adopted the Mahayana model in dealing with suffering. Okay. So the theoretical foundation of Dharma therapy that we developed, of course, is the idea came from the Buddhist enlightenment experience as detailed in the Samyutta Nikaya connected courses on causations, and the universal law of dependent originations and implications, and the Four Noble Truths. This is the theoretical foundations. Of course, it's quite simple. We said in Buddhism, of course, most of you would know that from wrong view and ignorance and mindfulness, that you would lead to suffering. And then to heal to eliminate suffering, all you need to do is develop right view, wisdom, and mindfulness. So this is basically the theoretical foundation of Dharma therapy that we have developed. So what's the main difference between Dharma therapy and other therapy? Of course, it's the Dharma is the foundation, and the wisdom, the pivotal factors for healings and transformation. So it's the wisdom and the right view, okay? Ignorance is the cause of suffering, and the ending of ignorance depends on right view and wisdom that arise from the studying and practicing the Dharma. So the pivotal factor for healing and transformation in Dharma therapy is the development of right view and wisdom. Okay, and then right view and wisdom are built on wise attention and paying attention as directed by the Dharma. So one of the most important theoretical foundation is that we believe that people can be updated like an iPhone. If you have wrong view, you can update yourself by downloading the Dharma and the right view into your mind, and then you'll be able to escape from suffering. So there's three major steps of Dharma therapy. There's the building the theoretic environment, investigating, and gaining insight. And then the final step will be developing and maintaining right views and wise attention. And that's the three main steps, and you can divide it into 7 minor steps. Okay, and then how Dharma therapy can help a person. We help a person to comprehend, help clients to develop better understanding of the world and themselves. Of course, the assumption is that people do not really understand the world, and through deeper understanding of the world, people can be able to deal with their suffering. A deeper and more wholesome comprehension of the original problem as seen from the perspective of the Dharma, with this perspective from more realistic and wholesome attitudes and values. And then the second thing that we help a person is to manage the suffering. Provide clients with a new way to live and a technique, building spiritual oasis, which is mindfulness or meditations. We found that meditation is a very key and core components in helping clients to deal with their psychological issues. And to better manage the emotions through learning and understanding the working of the mind, way of life that would not only be easily swayed by external events. And then finally, we want to help the clients to find meaning in life. So we have published paper on these therapy, okay, and then I also want to introduce to you the Mahayana model, a wellness model. This model is, instead of targeting suffering and the elimination of suffering, Buddhists would be driven by a deep compassion to save all sentient beings. Suffering is not something to be eliminated, but a means to develop compassion. So with wisdom and compassion, the Buddha would have the skillful means to deal with all the challenges he or she would face while remaining in samsara to save all sentient beings. So why not a Mahayana Buddhist teaching-based model? So we did that. So a wellness model based on wisdom and compassion might be more acceptable to the general public as compared to a pathological model. So we did, and we developed a model. It's motivated by compassion to save all sentient beings. Of course, the compassion is the aspiration, the mind, and the commitment to attain Buddhahood. And skillful means with the wisdom and compassion as the foundation, a Buddha would practice the 6 perfections and develop all the skillful means to save all sentient beings. So what is ATP, the Awareness Training Program? It's a Mahayana teaching, Mahayana Buddhist intervention that is doctrinally aligned to Mahayana Buddhist text, the Chanti Mochana Sutra, so that it becomes theory, practice are coherent. We found that the theory and practice should be incoherent. When the theory and practice is not in coherence, then you may need to cognitive dissonance. So that's what we did. It's a 6 week, 3 hours, 6 weekly, 3 hours. So there's 6 weeks, and then 1 weekend. So altogether will be 7 weeks. And the objective is to enhance participant ability to handle stress and psychological well-being by developing their compassion and their wisdom in the form of non-attachment. And so the development of the mindful program, we have the whole model developed, and then we ran a randomized waitlist control trial with 122 participants in Hong Kong, and we measured it by the self-reported psychological questionnaires using the perceived stress scale, sense of coherence, the psychological well-being, GHQ, and the non-attachment scale. And so the data show a significant improvement in the pre, post, and post-3 months data. I will not bore you with the detail of the statistics. All these has been published in paper in the Mindfulness Journal, which is called a randomized controlled trial of the Awareness Training Program, a group-based Mahayana Buddhist teaching program. This journal article are freely downloadable. You just go onto the internet and you can download them if you want to. Okay. So we also did many of the neuroscientific research. One of the paper that we published is entrainment of chaotic activities in brain and heart during MBSR mindfulness training. This is a paper that we did. We measured the EEG signal of the participant, and we found out that the EEG and the ECG. EEG is, of course, measuring the brain wave, and ECG is, of course, measuring the heartbeat. And we found out that when the students are practicing the mindfulness program, the EEG and the ECG become coordinated. That's what we found out. So if you want to look at that, we also did that. And we published all this paper, and Newsweek magazine reported it. Mind-body connections during meditation can now be tracked thanks to science. We were the scientists. We came up with the method how to measure the connections between the mind and the heart. Okay, we have a way to do that. And if you want to look at it, we introduce the how you do it in the Jovi journal, using wavelet entropy to demonstrate how mindfulness practice increased coordination between irregular cerebral and cardiac activities. This is the paper we published. And we also published a paper on repetitive religious chanting modulate the late-stage brain response to fear and stress-provoking pictures. So finding is that what we did was ask the participant to compare their chanting of Amitabha, Amitofan, 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 as opposed to Santa Claus, Sing Dan Lo Yan, Sing Dan Lo Yan, Sing Dan Lo Yan. And chanting Amitabha cannot change the early perceptual response to negative emotions, but the late-stage brain response and relevant physiological change to negative emotions are largely neutralized. What that means is that we measure the brain wave at time zero. At time zero, when the participants see the negative pictures, when they were chanting Santa Claus, they will see the negative impact, both at the initial stage and the emotional stage. However, when the participant was chanting, these were Buddhists, when they were chanting Amitabha names, we noticed that when the chanting did not influence them in the initial stage where they saw the picture, however, the negative emotion or negative response rate as was measured by the EEG wave did not go up. So when they see the negative pictures, the chanting of Amitabha more or less neutralized the negative emotions. This is what we find out using the EEG machine. Okay? So we published all this paper. We also find out how the neurophysiological correlates of religious chanting. And with all that research background, we developed the Master of Buddhist Counseling program. Of course, why we are doing is all motivated by compassion. And then eventually we came up with the postgraduate diploma in professional practice in Buddhist counseling. As a result of all these research and programs, we are now offering Buddhist counseling to people in Hong Kong, and it has now slowly becoming a very, very popular way of therapy and options for people to deal with the psychological issues. Not only that they can go to Western teaching-based counseling, they can now also go to Buddhist counseling-based counselor to help them with their psychological issues. Okay, so thank you very much. That's what we have been doing.
Thank you very much, Venerable Sikhin Hang from the University of Hong Kong for your wonderful presentation about the compassion or Karuna in the Mahayana Sutta. Venerable Mahasangha, Reverend Father, Brother, Sister, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, now we have the valuable knowledge, precious knowledge shared with us by the distinguished scholar. So we have time for questions and answer around 25 minutes. Any question? Could you show your hand for 10 minutes? My dear Reverend Brother Suvat informed me that we have only 10 minutes for break. Okay, Venerable ladies and gentlemen, distinguished scholar, you have any question, please? Venerable Prasi Vidyaporn, the Vice President of Mcu Buddhist University, you have question? Any question, please? Please. Associate Professor Dr. Suvin Raksat, Assistant Rector of the Mcu Buddhist University, have question? Question related Karuna and Agape. Okay, please. Venerable, please. Could you please hand over the microphone to Venerable? Introduce yourself. Just yes.
Good morning, dear speakers. My name is Prago from Singapore. Since this is this dialogue, and I'd like to thank the Venerable from Hong Kong for presenting the research you've done. I was wondering whether the Catholic has the same, and will there be maybe future programs, maybe for collaboration, or maybe the Catholic themselves develop such programs for their own community, because I believe the devotees who are in distress in the Buddhist community, if they search for the Buddhist counselors, maybe those people from the other faiths may not be so ready to seek the Buddhist counseling. Yeah.
Please, Venerable Sik Hin Hang. Yes.
I can only answer from my own experience. I do not really know has the Catholics or Christians been developed their model, but I think the Christians and Catholics model is very much integrated with the Western psychology or philosophy. So that's what I think. However, from our own experience, the clients that come and use our service have both Buddhists, non-Buddhists, both Catholics and Christians, and of course non-religious people. And because we introduced the program letting people know that it has Buddhist background, but of course we do not require our clients to become a Buddhist after they use our service. But Buddhist teachings is more or less universal. Anybody that study Buddhist teachings and perceive and understand the world as according to how the Buddha introduced it to us, and use the Buddhist meditations, and in that way they can update their mind and help them to eliminate suffering. And our service has proved to be very effective to most of our clients. I don't know, have I answered your questions?
So, you happy with the answer, Venerable? Okay. Okay, any question? Please. Okay, please.
Thank you for the very enlightening presentations from our distinguished speakers. I have a question directed to His Eminence, Giorgio, and perhaps Reverend Father Kang could also complement the answer, because it has to do with the concept of love and how it evolved to be agape. Now, it's very interesting that Your Eminence, you chose the book of Mcu to speak of love, and specifically from chapter 6, verses 8. Now, in that particular passage, it's interesting for me, because I studied this book myself in Biblicum, but I will just would like to hear your comments. In that particular passage, chapter 6, verse 8, before even mentioning of Hesed, or loosely translated as compassion, kindness, or whatever, there is a particular noun there that is always loosely translated as justice, but it's actually judgment. So it goes hand in hand, to do justice, to work with justly, and then to love. So meaning that even before we go on, now I jump Reverend Father Kang in the New Testament, where we talk about, where you mention compassion, splatnizomai. So my question is, has mishpat, or what loosely is translated as justice, but it's really just judgment, has it been forgotten in the overall concept of love? Because I see it as closely linked to have pass judgment, to have justice, and talking about Hesed before we go on to justice. To the agape. I'm not too sure if you got my question, just a point of clarification. Thank you.
Well, being a scholar in Bible teachings, you may find by yourself the answer to your question, because it's quite a technical one, but I thank you for this underlining the depth of this passage, and the fact that in agape, I would say just one word and I leave the floor to our Reverend Father. The fact that in agape, even the judgmental dimension of love is not absent. I think it's something that we have to remind ourselves. In the full revelation brought by Jesus Christ, that divine love becomes a love that tells the truth. So it's a judgment on the life, on what is evil, what is sin. But it offers also the fulfillment of that judgment into a surpassing love that goes beyond even the wrongdoing. And so in the Christian and so fully revealed dimension of love that Christ embodied himself, we can see the fulfillment of what was announced by the prophets. But I better leave the floor to the expert of New Testament.
I'm sorry that I'm not an expert on Bible or New Testament, but I can say that there is tension between justice and love, always in Christian Bible and also understanding of Christian faith. Famous movie, The Mission. You remember maybe in 1980s, there is famous movie Mission, the missionary stories of Jesuits in the southern Latin America. There was famous, the verse of the actor said that if the violence is justice, love has no place to stay. I was very touched by that word that, yes, judgment and justice, reconciliation, it's not easy. It's not easy. But what God showed us is the way how to restore, how to heal wound, how to recover. But of course, on the basis of justice. And there are full of stories in the gospel also. Jesus mentioned final judgment, very sure. But always the final story is the restoration and reconciliation by agape love. Without love, there is no justice. But without justice, of course, there is no true love. I think that is the tension and creative tension and dynamic tension in the gospel and in the whole Bible. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Venerable Mahasangha, Reverend Father, Brother, Sister, distinguished scholar. So now, representative of distinguished scholar participant in the conference room of MCU now, and also the audience watching and joining the conference through MCU TV. I would like to express my heartfelt to distinguished scholar as follow: Your Eminence, Marinko and Venerable Ananta Thero, Reverend Frater, Kang In Gan and Venerable Sik Hin Hang, for your precious knowledge shared with us today. Thank you very much. Could you please give a big applause? So we have 15 minutes for tea and coffee, and then come back to the conference room 10:30. Please. Thank you.
Thank you very much for Venerable Mahasulasak Pattaseno. We will break on 15 minutes. Please be on time. We come back on 10:30. Anyway, you can bring your food, your coffee in the conference room. Thank you very much.